waiting for his slash her slash its mates to pick the message up. My God, every time I think it couldn't get any more extraordinary, it surprises me. It's impossible, I hate it. It's evil, it's astonishing. I want to kiss it to death. I was originally going to do the bootstrap paradox speech. However, there's no way in hell I remember and do all of that. So that's the best you're going to get. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to continue on with Series 9 with Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Written by Toby Whitehouse and is directed by Daniel O'Hara. This would be the second story in Series 9, and it's also the second two-parter in Series 9. Now, Series 9 was a series that was advertised with mainly a majority of it building up on two-parter stories, very similar in the style of the Sarah Jane Adventures or the Six Doctors era on the TV series, when it was mostly built up of two-part episodes. So, with that out of the way, the story now has a lot more time to develop its plot lines further. This story doesn't actually tackle, in terms of like the big bombastic mystery box storytelling, it doesn't actually tackle anything there. Though it does tackle some themes that Series 9 has going to be dealing with Clara's abandonment issues, her characterization here, and as well as the Doctor and this theme of the series of the Doctor basically coming to his inevitable death. Something which, yes, at this point in the series has been done to death. It's done with the 10th Doctor, it's done with the 11th Doctor twice, three times if you think about it. And now we're doing the 12th Doctor. So it is kind of dull on that respect. However, this story is its main advertised, this story in particular, this one adventure, has one mission, one goal for its audience. It wants to feel, it wants to put its audiences in the mind of classic Doctor Who. This story has many elements, many of the tropes, shall we say, of classic Doctor Who, particularly with one particular kind of Doctor Who story. We are going full depth into the base under siege, aka the bus story. For those of you who don't know, Doctor Who, instead of having like a usual status quo, they would have a particular type of story that Doctor Who will do occasionally. And depending on the era, will do it more popular than others. For example, there's the Ambassadors, where the Doctor is stuck in between two opposing races, which are sort of good, sort of evil, but they're mutually trying to just survive, and the Doctor's trying to get the two sides to work on. It's one of those kind of cases. And the bus story is a particular type of Doctor Who story where the Doctor and his companions land in an enclosed environment where they meet a handful of characters, and during their adventure, the siege that they're under, the base that they're under, gets attacked by almost all sides, where it doesn't seem there's any chance of escaping, and it's up to our Doctor, our heroes, and our friends along the way to try and survive and try and work out the mystery of why they're being attacked in the first place. It's something that was hugely popular during the second Doctor era, with not only the most bus stories, but also some of the best bus stories, with stories like Fury from the Deep, Tomb of the Cybermen. I don't know, would you count Tomb of the Cybermen? Web of Fear, The Abominable Snowman. I don't know if you count Power of the Daleks counts as a bus story. And the Ice Warriors is another great one too. And the Seeds of Doom are perfect examples of base under siege stories. But however, of course, the series has tackled more bus stories, and in the revived era, it's mainly used as a shorthand to be like, hey, look at us, we can do classic series style storytelling, most noticeably in the 10th Doctor story, The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. That's a very great example of bus. So, yeah, this was something that was really appealing to me just by the get-go. Something a bit more self-contained, a little bit more isolated compared to its environment of Doctor Who. So this is something which I think a lot of people were looking forward to, a lot of people were excited upon, especially classic Who fans like myself. And so the general consensus of this story is that it's good, but it has some issues. Most noticeably, people criticise certain aspects of the ending of the second part, as well as a really strange breaking the fourth wall moment at the start of part 2, as well as some of the characters, seemingly from the majority sense, to be uninteresting and a bit lackluster. But that out of the way, let's get into the story at hand. Now, I really like the pre-credit sequence here. It really sets up what this story is intended to do. We basically learn about this cast, this crew. They're basically in this military/scientific base, as they got this strange sort of. They started mining here for oil rights, and they've basically found themselves in a flooded city in Scotland after a dam broke down many years ago back in the 1980s. But oddly enough, what they find there is a ship which seemingly comes from outer space. And there's these strange writing on the walls. And then one of them gets killed in an accident revolving around the engine of the ship, firing a blast of fire, killing the main captain, who I can't remember his name of, but it's not really that important. And then later on, they get reintroduced to this character, as well as this strange Victorian-looking guy as ghosts. It is important to note that originally this story was actually going to have one title instead of Under the Lake and Before the Flood. This story was originally going to be called Ghost in the Machine, which, for the title for this story, I don't really think it matches. Though, yes, there is ghosts, yes, there are machines, but I don't think the title does the story justice enough. But I do like the idea of, just having one title, part 1, part 2. It just makes things a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, personally. And then when we come back from the credit sequence, we get introduced to the Doctor and Clara, and they've basically, I think they say it's 3 weeks, and they're basically just walking around this abandoned base, and the Doctor is confused, he's conflicted, as there's something about this base is making the TARDIS seem uneased. The TARDIS seems to have, it's already been established that the TARDIS has a sort of will of its own, like stories like the Doctor's wife. And the Doctor kind of senses that the TARDIS doesn't really like being here, but the Doctor wants to investigate as to why, what's happening here, what's so unnatural that the TARDIS would be, would basically go bonkers. But Clara here, now, let's talk about Clara, because Clara here has something which I think was a criticism with Clara's in Series 7, something which was then rectified in Series 8, and now seemed to have returned in Series 9, and that is the concept that Clara is a different character depending on who writes her. For example, Toby Whitehouse has Clara as this really energetic companion who knows her place as the Doctor's companion, but also really likes the adventure, almost wants to jump into the adventure, to the point where the Doctor even gets too concerned at one point, and kind of sees this kind of negative impact on Clara's life, that she would rather run into danger than purely enjoy and experience life. As the Doctor tells her, don't go native. You should be happy, you should be loving, you should, go on relationships. you should try and at least have a resemblance of a normal human life. But Clara kind of, though she's like, oh, that's really sweet that you care about me, Doctor, and very tender about it. But honestly, I'm fine. Which the story kind of pushes lots of scenes of her not being so fine about it. Now, I personally do like Clara in this story in a bubble. I do like her characterization here in the context of what this story is trying to do with her and what this story is on a self-contained basis. Her as a character, however, it feels completely different to the Clara we previously watched last episode, and feels also, again, completely different to her characterization in Series 8. And as well in certain episodes of Series 7. And also as well, it does mean that Clara in the story, in terms of the plot, in terms of her learning and getting involved in a story, is basically at minimalism. Her main plot line in the story is her relationship with the Doctor and just trying to survive this story for her and the Doctor to resolve this kind of conflict, which doesn't really at the end of the adventure. I'll get a little bit more into the depth of their characters later on in the story, but first of all, the Doctor gets introduced to the cast member, the crew, after they be introduced to the ghost. They seem to escort them to the ship. They see this strange writing on the wall, and then the ghosts seemingly try to kill the Doctor and Clara. And when they try to escape, they find the rest of the cast basically locked up in this chamber room. I can't remember what it's called, but it is like a technical room where it's like it stops all radiation from entering or escaping, and it stops the radio waves just in case there's a radiation leak. And for some reason, the ghosts will not go in this room in fear of not letting their so-called message sent. And it's here we get introduced to the characters. Now, one big criticism with this story that a lot of people have is that the characters aren't that interesting. And although I do see where they're coming from, the characters in terms of their basic premise are really stock characters. You have the captain, you have the nerdy bleeder rather than a fighter kind of male character. You have the quirky girl who is also a kind of fangirl. You have the leader that cares more about the lives, but you also have the greedy businessman who wants to keep everybody here to try and basically keep the job and try and make a profit out of it. And so we get introduced to all these characters. The greedy boss character, Percy's, I don't remember his name is. I can't remember what the actor's name is. He's not in it that long, or at least not the character anyway, as he gets killed and gets turned into a ghost. Spoiler warning, not really, because it's really predictable. And what this story, like, his character feels like it came right out of the 60s, even by his like appearance. Like the way his hair, I know this sounds strange, but the way his haircut compared to like his skinny, strange persona appearance makes it feel like he's literally been dragged, a young man dragged from the 1960s Doctor Who and been chucked into this modern episode. And so there's not really much to him, but it is kind of the stock character. We get introduced to Cass, played by Sophie Stone, who is a deaf actress who plays the first deaf character in Doctor Who. She's not the first deaf actress, the actor, sorry. The first person is somebody from Destiny of the Daleks. I can't remember his name, but there was a person in that story who was the first deaf actor. Sophie Stone is the first female actress to play a deaf actress to play a character in Doctor Who, and her character is actually deaf within the narrative, and she is actually the leader with Lun, played by Zakwa Ismail. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, being her signer. There's a really awkward and embarrassing scene which really just makes me just when the Doctor acts like he knows how to sign, and he kind of really embarrasses himself, and he's like, okay, sorry, I don't actually know sign language. I must have deleted it out of my memory. I really didn't like that scene. Something, again, that we'll have to talk about later on. But Cass is a really interesting character here. Again, she's a very stock character. She is basically just the leader of the crew. But she clearly has this care and appreciation for her crew, especially Lun. And she also has this, she just has a great way of expressing her face. She always has this kind of downbeat, but also very determined expression on her face. Someone who, she kind of clearly is kind of tired of her job. However, she is still determined to life with her friends and puts the safety of her friends and her comrades over everything above else, even though the Doctor tricks her, well, not tricks her, but encourages her and the rest of the crew to stay on the base later on in the episode when they can have the chance to escape. And yeah, there's some really interesting scenes. There's a great scene with Cass where it's a really great horror moment where Cass is walking around the base on her own, and one of the ghosts is chasing her with an axe, and the ghost, because of the weight of the axe, it's like grinding on the floor, and because Cass, she can't hear anything, it's really intense and really atmospheric, and it's really great. Let's talk about now. Okay, let's get to the characters first. There's O'Donnell, played by Morven Christiani. Again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. She plays this kind of, she plays the soldier character, but also as well the fangirl, somebody who's actually seemed to have had a history with UNIT, but also knows about the Doctor, about his files, and is also seemingly a massive fan. This comes into, I really like her character. She's very much in similar vein of Osgood from Day of the Doctor. However, I would prefer O'Donnell personally, because that her excitement, that little energy of the fangirl in the story, it's not so in your face. It's mainly played for these scenes, and sometimes it is worked for great humour. There's a great bit when, just after she comes out of the TARDIS, she's like, Doctor, I'll catch you up in a minute, I just need to get something in my shoe. And the Doctor leaves, and she's like, it's bigger on the inside, 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 how's it bigger on the inside? Okay, let's go. That has that energy, but most of those scenes actually kind of play. There's a great moment when basically the ghosts only come out in night mode on the base because it's so underneath the lake, underneath the water, that they need to make artificial days and mornings. And the Doctor, he smiles, he grins at her, and it's like, well done for that fantastic idea of turning the day mode on. She's like, really? Oh, come on, it's only nothing. And as soon as she's considering like all of these compliments to her idea, the Doctor's just like, now turn it off. Turn it off. We need to find out about these ghosts. We also have Bennett, played by Ashton Ali, and he does this. I think he, out of the characters, is really stock. He is the bleeder, not a fighter character, and he doesn't have much screen time. He doesn't have that much depth until the second half of the second episode. But Ashton Ali does a great job here and really gives him this kind of soft energy to him that makes him much more memorable than he probably should be. And then of course we have the villains, which are these ghosts, creatures, and the effect on the ghosts is so cool. They're transparent, but it's just light enough that in distances you can believe that it looks solid enough. There's also this green kind of twirly effect, which is simple but effective, but what's the greatest effect is the eyes. And in certain shots at the start of the story, you think it's just like these like hollowed black eyes that kind of synced in, kind of very similar to Davros's design, which makes this really strange how this story is like right after, and her eyes kind of resemble Davros. Kind of feels like there was tying something to that, but it doesn't. But there are a few shots, especially later down, you kind of realise but the eyes are like completely sunk in, and when you look at the eye section, you can see the back of the head of the actors, and the way some of the scenes shots, like you see some of the ghosts who are transparent holding phones, holding weaponry, and they are in physical form and completely untransparent. It's really a cool effect. It might be really simple. I think something, though it must be hard on a camera, with something like After Effects, I imagine this effect is quite easy to do, but it's simple and effective, and it really is a really cool effect. This leads into one of my greatest things about this story. Daniel O'Hara, who shoots most of all of episode 1 and half of about 50% of episode 2 in this base. A base which seems very simple in terms of its design, and it's got this green kind of muddy look. You can kind of feel that there's this damp mold quality to this base, despite them trying to keep it as clean as possible. And there's this green feel, almost alien feel to it throughout the entire story, and as well as some really great close-ups of the actors and the actresses in this adventure. This would be Daniel O'Hara's only story for Doctor Who. That is a crime! That is an absolute crime! Like, you don't put someone so good, show them prove themselves, and never have them come back. What? What? It's just... I mean, the story, it looks absolutely gorgeous, despite it having a very simple look, and a look that doesn't really change and revolve for the majority of the story. It's so iconic and it's so striking. Despite it clearly being on a lower budget, you don't really feel that. It's only when you watch it a few times, you're like, oh yeah, most of the story is set in this base, and it could be easy to use the similar corridors. Like, logistically, you can make this story really cheap, and it probably was cheap for a Doctor Who episode to make, but you don't feel it. And that is what's so cool about it. And Daniel O'Hara also brings out a lot of character, a lot of depth, and a lot of great, beautiful shots. Rewatch the story again, and just keep an eye out to what the camera is doing in certain scenes and certain elements. It's just astonishing. I honestly think Daniel O'Hara should return to the series. A really great, powerful director. Now let's get into the cliffhanger for part 1. The Doctor gets so many of these questions. These ghosts are coming out. They are actually ghosts. And this brings out a kind of excitement out of the Doctor. This is really one of the most memorable scenes in this story is when the Doctor finds himself in an awkward situation where our characters are less like, now our captain died here, but the Doctor's still excited and is just completely baffled by how everybody isn't excited by the fact that they're meeting real life ghosts. And Clara gets him to read these cards out, which I will admit is a really funny scene where it's like, I'm sorry about the death of your friend slash family member slash loved one slash pet, and I will do everything to my power to rectify it. That's a great line. Though that scene, I think, went a bit too long. It kind of felt the joke kind of lost its steam by the end of it. But beside that, it was a really good scene. And in fact, there's a lot of humour in this story. And I think it's hit and miss. The story is hit and miss in terms of its humour. But what I really, really like is that the story is built up on its mystery. And because it's a self-contained story, it's a self-contained era. Though our characters are different people, they have their interests and stuff. They're all interested in figuring out where these ghosts are coming from, who is it, who are they summoning to, why is it sending this signal towards Earth, and it keeps us all engaged because our characters are also interested and fascinated by this very concept. Even though it is tragic that their captain died at the start of the story, and stuff, but there's mystery and there's stuff keeps building up, like how it turns out the ghosts do have some sort of intelligence. They actually send a signal for a crafted unit to actually come to rescue them. And the Doctor learns about this, and it's like, right, we can't get anywhere because these ghosts have tried to get the military involved, and they will use anything in their power to try and spread this message, this signal, which they learn that these ghosts are kind of signal, and they find out these ghosts aren't naturally made. There are these artificial like phenomenon where they see this writing and you have this imprint in your head, and then when you die, this imprint basically keeps your soul alive to the point where you become a ghost, and it sends a signal getting everybody to come to this particular one place, one event. And the Doctor, he's so baffled by the mystery, he's so conflicted about the ideas, that he makes a decision. He's going to go back in time to try and find the answers, bringing around O'Donnell and Bennett, whilst Clara, Cass and Lund stay at the base to try and figure out what's going on here. Well, I think they all go to were originally all going to plan to go back in time. However, due to flooding, the Doctor gets separated from Clara, and the Doctor, Donna and O'Donnell and Bennett go to the past. This is something that actually isn't new to the 12th Doctor from my marathon point of view, because the Doctor has done this before in the story The Crawling Terror, in which he goes back in time to the original events to find out a bit more about it. In that story, it was basically a chapter. Here, it's actually the main focus of the second half of the story. And the cliffhanger of the story, though I know a lot of people criticize it because it's like, of course, like it's going to resolve itself. But personally, because it's not really how, if the Doctor dies or not, it's how he's going to survive, how is he going to combat this particular threat. As the Clara, Cass and Lun in the modern times, on the future shall I see, they look and they see another ghost outside of the base, and the ghost turns around and it's a ghost of the 12th Doctor. You cannot imagine. When I first saw that cliffhanger, I watched it with two of my friends, and we jumped. I mean, like, holy Christ! It's mainly to see Peter Capaldi in this like makeup with this effect. It was just so cool, but also as well, it does kind of tease the death of the Doctor, which I know is something that has been done and it has been done before, before the story. But the fact, like the way this scene is shot, the way the cliffhanger is set up, and just the cool visual on it, I think this really works. And also as well, in terms of the narrative, which builds up these ghosts and the ideas of it, but you do kind of question, okay, the Doctor will get out of it. Of course he will. But how? And the story gets you. And so episode 2 starts with probably one of the strangest scenes in Doctor Who history. The 12th Doctor looks directly into the camera in the TARDIS on his own, completely unconnected to the story that it's telling, to give basically the audience a lecture about bootstrap paradoxes. And he goes into the story of Beethoven and how somebody was a massive fan, goes back in time, discovers that Beethoven isn't real, and then basically becomes Beethoven. And the Doctor then questions and ponders the audiences with who originally wrote those notes, who wrote Beethoven's Fifth. And it's a really cool scene. I know a lot of people don't like it. I personally do. It also then leads into probably again one of the strangest elements. Like series 9 so far has been really strange, because in episode 2 of this story, the Doctor Who theme plays with a guitar bass into it. And the guitar is played by Peter Capaldi, making Capaldi the only musician Doctor to be a part of the musician the music of Doctor Who, which is really interesting, really fascinating. This is going connecting with the idea that the 12th Doctor in Series 9 has a complete characterization shift than previous stories. This does actually, I think, benefit this story. With the previous episode, the quirkiness and the strangeness was bombastful, it's right in your face. But here it's a little bit more toned down compared to that story. The Doctor is still quirky, he's still bizarre. He still has the sonic sunglasses and he still plays the guitar. However, it's toned down a little bit, and the Doctor is much more in line with the 4th Doctor per se, where he has this kind of authority, but he also has this this Doctor quirky acknowledgement, and he just constantly like talks to himself, and he's constantly like figuring things out in his head. It's really strange, it's really bizarre, but I think in this story it really does work. And so actually in the second half we actually get the story kind of split into a back of the round storytelling, and the story does something really interesting here, where we have the Doctor actually back in the 1980s, where it's during the Cold War, and Scotland has made this little village which is before the flood, hence in the title, and they're trying to find out like where the ship came from and what's happening, where they get introduced to a Trevelyan, a species anyway that was introduced in the Toby Whithouse written story, The God Complex. Nice little tie into there, but it's not really distracting. It's just something that like, it's just a recurring kind of alien. It expands the universe of Doctor Who. I really like that. I like the idea that these Trevelyan's would be like a default alien, so that the Doctor Who universe doesn't have to constantly explain like this kind of monster. And basically this Trevelyan explains that he is actually like a funeral undertaker for the Fisher King, one of their last rulers before they were enslaved by the Athenians. The alien race that was actually had made appearance in both Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. This would be the only reference in the actual main series itself, which is really strange, really odd, and really bizarre, but it's still pretty cool. And so the Doctor, O'Donnell and Bennett are in this base, which basically is made to look like a Russian base, to practice for the Cold War in case a war between America and Russia did break out. So this was like a kind of like an abandoned training ground. And we also find out that the Fish King isn't dead, and actually revives and makes this pattern and kills the Undertaker and turns him into the first ghost of the story. And as well, we get the Fisher King gets stomping around. We get introduced to essentially the villain, the Fisher King, who I just like to say doesn't get a lot of screen time. He only really makes a big, impactful thing in his final scene. But the build up to him, the fact that we only see like the time we think he's dead and then he comes back, and then the shots where you kind of just see him like through a window and you just see his silhouette, really gives this character, who doesn't get a lot of screen time, a massive impact. It's also important to note that he is voiced by Peter Serinfowicz. I'm absolutely butchering that name, but it's the guy who I believe is the voice or is the physical appearance of Darth Maul from the Star Wars franchise. He's also in Shaun of the Dead and many others. Great comedian actor. But here he does this very serious, really cool voice for the Fisher King, which gives this massive presence. With the exception of the Roar. Now, the Roar is actually portrayed by Conrad Tyler. Now, this was a massive deal to all my mates who were watching this story at the time, because that is actually the lead singer of the heavy metal band Slipknot. I know very little about Slipknot. I wouldn't consider myself a fan. I'd have heard maybe one or two songs I like, but I don't love them. And like they are a really grungy rock band, and I'm not too keen. I don't know much about them, but I know a lot of people who are massive fans of Slipknot, and so this little fact is really impactful. Personally, I think he was kind of wasted. The Raw here, though, like a cool, like alien roar, could have been played by anyone. Like, it could have been played by the original actor, Peter. I'm not going to say his last name again. And I don't think you could have really cared or minded. It's really strange, but that's beside the point. The interaction between him, the Fisher King, and the Doctor, very cool, very impactful. But also as well, these scenes also influence the other plot line, as the Doctor can talk to Clara through the phone. And it's here that he also learns about the ghost, and the Doctor Ghost is also saying something different, a list of names of all of the people who have died in order, going to Clara's name and then a few others, leading into the Doctor's. And the Doctor knows that he's about to die, he's gonna get killed, and he basically has to consider, like, right, there's a chance that I'm going to die in the story, there's no way of preventing that. However, like I said, the ending kind of ruins it. A lot of people did dislike the ending, although I personally aren't that bothered by it, because the story at the start, in episode 1, there's a little hint as to a solution to this. But the Ghost 12th Doctor is really cool. I also like there's not really much, though there are scenes that focus particularly on this ghost, when it's more than the other ghosts. He doesn't get treated like any different. He is just another ghost. And it's just a complete messing up with our characters, and it's so cool. Cass, Luna, and Clara keep themselves in the cage. They realise that Lun, he hadn't seen the writing, so he is actually free of the ghost's curse to try and kill him. So he can actually move around free, and one of the ghosts takes the Clara's phone, because she couldn't take it in the cage with her, because it would have no signal. So Clara leaves the phone outside, and the ghost realises this. The ghost of O'Donnell, who gets killed in the past, picks us up and takes it away, and Lun has to save the day. And Cass kind of freaks out, and she's also stuck with Clara, who doesn't know sign, and it leads into this dynamic between them, which I actually really like, though there's not really much to it. There's not much impact in the story, apart from some really great atmospheric moments. Like I said, this is around the time when that scene where Cass is on alone as she splits off with Clara, and we can see and we can hear the ghost of the former captain dragging the axe. Really cool, really powerful. Like I said, Daniel O'Hara, probably one of the best directors, probably easily one of the best one-off directors the series has ever had. So yeah, let's talk about like the main ending with the Doctor. It turns out the Doctor is the one that floods it after tricking the Fisher King that the signal will not send, because the Doctor erased his memory of the speech, as well as something else which I can't really remember. And it tricks the Fisher King into basically making itself vulnerable for the dam to basically explode, as the Doctor uses one of the energy conversion, which is revealed right early on in the episode to be missing. He uses that to basically blow up the dam, destroying and sending all the water into the village, killing the Fisher King. And the Doctor actually puts himself in the cabinet. And that's actually a really cool, clever twist, because that cabinet was a kind of like building up as to being revealed where the Fisher King is in the present or in the future events. And that's really cool. Now, one of the main interesting things in part 2 is the dynamic between the Doctor and Bennett, because Bennett, like I said in the story, is mainly not really much interested in him until something happens. O'Donnell gets killed by the Fisher King, and Bennett does kind of realise that the Doctor's a Time Lord, and not only that, he realises the message, the list of names from his ghost from the future, and he does trying to prevent O'Donnell to leave, to stay in the TARDIS, but O'Donnell doesn't. Which, rewatching that seems really weird. It's kind of like the excuse he gives is that he needs somebody to stay in the TARDIS in case Clara rings again. Why then does he not recommend Bennett is really strange. But when you realise what's happening, it does make sense, because in the list of names, O'Donnell's name was next. And so she was the next one to be killed. And with that, the Doctor basically had his theory, and it basically proven true. And Bennett knew this. You can kind of see this. This is kind of, maybe not in terms of the Doctor's personality and the way Peter Capaldi plays him, but in terms of writing, this is absolutely Series 8, 12th Doctor, where he has these schemes, these plans, might put people in danger, might knowingly kill someone, but he does it so that he can save much more lives, can prevent much more things, darker things from happening. And that is so cool, and that's so well inversed. As the Doctor goes into the future and realises that his ghost isn't actually his ghost, it's actually a hologram which he uses to capture the scream of the Fisher King, so that he can go and send them back into that room which is isolated from the rest of the world, and basically they trap the ghost so that the unit can come along and save them. This is the thing that a lot of people criticise the story, the revelation that the ghost is actually a hologram. I didn't actually mind it, because in the first episode they do actually tease that there are these real life model holograms that can be presented. There's a chase scene where they're trying to capture the ghost, and we see Clara as a hologram. I should have mentioned that earlier on in the video, but I only just remembered it. So I don't think it's that bad, and it does make logical sense. And this all leads into the final scene where the Doctor basically reminds Clara, basically realises to Clara an interesting fact about the events that have appeared, where the Doctor gets the idea from the ghost, but the ghost came from the Doctor's idea of making a ghost, which came from the ghost. So where did the original idea of the ghost come from? Who originally made Beethoven's Fifth? And that is Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Overall, in my opinion, this story is so unbelievably underrated. This is one of the stories that I rewatch over and over again. Sure, the characters are a bit light, and there's not really much to them, and they're also kind of stock, in which in that description is that, these are characters that you've kind of seen a million times before. But they're interesting enough that you do care for them, and you do hope that all of them survive by the end of the story. The story has a lot of great twists and a lot of turns, there's a lot of great atmosphere, great writing, great humour, partially. Some of it does kind of doesn't work, and some of them do. I do really like the funeral undertaker guy. I thought he was really funny. He kind of has this kind of really strange kinkiness to being enslaved. It's kind of off-putting, and I like how the Doctor takes it extremely seriously, and he's just well, not seriously, but the Doctor's serious towards him, trying to get information. It's really really funny. And like I said, the main reason to go into the story is just to get a really great classic feeling 12th Doctor story directed by the one and only Daniel O'Hara. And I really wish Daniel O'Hara returned to the series. His style really fits this. If you're somebody who enjoys particularly 60s Doctor Who, like a majority of the second Doctor stories, you will have a blast with this story. And as somebody who's a massive fan of the second Doctor, you can see where I'm going with this. It's a story which I think a lot of people, not put under the rug, overlook. This is a story a lot of people overlook. I highly recommend you rewatch the story. You might not enjoy it, you might think it's perfectly fine, or it deserves to be overlooked, per se, but give it another watch. And I feel like a lot of people, and at least some people of you, will find that there is this hidden gem in this story. Great pacing, great atmosphere, great characters, just overall a great time. And so that is Under the Flood, Under the Lake and Before the Flood. So join me next time when the Doctor and Clara go to Viking times and they meet this impossible girl as they get intertwined with a conflict between the humans and one of the most deadliest alien warrior races in the universe, as they're all crashing around on this small village as the Norse gods turn out to be true-ish. So join me next time for The Girl Who Died, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!